They say home is where the heart is. But for 13 long years, my home became the place where my heart broke slowly, quietly. One rule at a time. The day I opened my door to my daughter and her husband, I thought I was opening it to family. In truth, I was letting chaos walk right in and hang its coat in my hallway. I remember the morning clearly. My daughter, Amy, called, her voice trembling between guilt and hope. "Mom, it's just for a little while," she said. "Until we get on our feet. You know how tense things are with Mark's mom." Of course I said yes, because that's what mothers do. We say yes even when our bones whisper no. They moved in with boxes that smelled of new beginnings. Amy was smiling, Mark was polite, and I was naive enough to believe we could all live together like one big happy family. Before they unpacked, I sat them down at the kitchen table. I had even written out a list of ground rules: clear, simple, fair. "Just so we all stay comfortable," I said, sliding the paper across the table. Rule 1. Share the household bills, utilities, groceries, and maintenance. Rule 2. Keep common spaces clean. Rule 3. If there's ever tension, we talk it through like adults. Rule 4. No additional pets without discussion. Rule 5. This arrangement is temporary until they're back on their feet. They nodded, smiled, and promised. God, they promised. For the first year, things were almost peaceful. Amy helped me cook on Sundays. Mark mowed the lawn. They paid their share on time. I even started to believe this might work. But peace, I've learned, has an expiration date when people mistake kindness for weakness. It started small, like most betrayals do. One afternoon, I came home to find a little golden puppy sitting in my living room, wagging its tail on my white carpet. Amy beamed. "Surprise, Mom, he's part of the family now." I reminded her of Rule 4. "Oh, come on, it's just one dog." "Don't be so uptight," she said, laughing. Mark didn't even look up from his phone. One dog became two became three. Each one arrived without a word of permission. And with every bark, every mess, every chewed-up shoe, my patience thinned like old paper. Still, I swallowed it, because that's what mothers do. We tell ourselves it's temporary. By the 3rd year, temporary was a ghost word in that house. They had turned my living room into a playpen for their dogs and their first baby, Ethan. Toys, diapers, food wrappers, muddy paw prints, it all blended together into a chaos I could barely recognize as home. Whenever I brought it up, Amy would sigh dramatically. "Mom, you're retired. What else do you have to do but help out?" Help out. That phrase became a weapon. I started doing the laundry because the baby kept her too busy. I cleaned the kitchen because Mark worked long hours. I paid extra on the electric bill because the kids needed the air conditioner. Each excuse chipped away at my boundaries. And slowly my house, the home I worked 40 years to build, began to feel like someone else's. Then came the day they asked me to move downstairs. It was Amy's idea, of course. "Mom, you'd be more comfortable downstairs. No stairs to climb, you know. Plus, we really need the extra room for the kids." I stared at her, half expecting her to laugh and say she was joking. But she wasn't. She'd already moved half my furniture, so I did it. I packed my things, my dignity, and my silence, and I moved into the basement of my own home. The walls were damp. The ceiling was low. When I looked up, I could hear their footsteps overhead. My daughter's laughter, her husband's booming voice, my grandkids running and playing. And I told myself at least they were happy. That's what matters. That's what I said. But that wasn't what I felt. By year 6, I realized I had become invisible. They made decisions about the house without me. They painted walls, replaced furniture, rearranged rooms. Once, I came upstairs to find they had swapped my dining table for something more modern. Amy said it made the house feel younger. It's funny how that word felt like a knife, because what she really meant was that I didn't belong there anymore. The bills started slipping too. First it was the phone, then the water, then the gas. Each time I'd ask, Amy would say, "We'll get it next month." Next month became next year. And then they just stopped pretending altogether. 9 years in, the total they owed me had climbed to $11,000. Money I could have used for retirement, for peace, for a life that didn't revolve around cleaning up after grown adults. I had records of every bill I covered. Utilities, groceries, even the mortgage when they forgot. I never showed them, because I was still hoping they'd remember the woman who raised them, not just the house they were using, but instead of gratitude, they gave me entitlement. It started one evening over dinner. Mark cleared his throat. "We were thinking," he said, "maybe it's time to put our names on the deed. I mean, we've been paying into this house for years." Amy nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world, as if 13 years of broken promises and unpaid bills entitled them to the roof over my head. I froze. The fork slipped from my hand for a moment. I thought I hadn't heard right. Then I realized I had. That was the night something inside me cracked. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. A deep, shaking understanding that I was no longer living with family. I was living with opportunists who had learned that I would always forgive them. I wanted to scream, to throw them out, to remind them whose name was actually on that deed. But instead, I smiled politely and said, "I'll think about it." The thing about mothers like me, we don't explode, we erode. Every yes we say when we should, said no, takes a piece of us with it. Until one day, there's nothing left but a woman in a basement, paying bills for people who don't even see her anymore. If someone had told me years ago that I'd be living in the basement of my own house, afraid to check the mailbox because it might hold another unpaid bill, I would have laughed and said, "That could never be me." But it was me. By the 10th year, the laughter upstairs had turned into a kind of background noise. Loud, careless, endless. I could tell what kind of day they were having by the way the ceiling shook. If the kids were happy, it rumbled. If Mark was angry, it trembled. And when the house went silent, I knew they'd left for the weekend, without ever telling me. I had stopped being part of their lives. I was just the woman living beneath their lives. The unpaid bills kept piling up. It started with the electric company. I noticed one day that the lights flickered, and when I checked the notice pinned to the door, it said "Final Warning." I went upstairs holding the paper in my hand. "Did you guys forget to pay this?" I asked, my voice soft, careful, like I was walking barefoot over glass. Amy barely looked up from her phone. "Mom, relax, we'll get to it." But they didn't. So I paid it like always, $184.76. I remember every number. Because when you're reliving on retirement savings, every dollar you spend on someone else feels like a piece of your own life disappearing. The next month, it was the internet. Then the car insurance. Then groceries. They had 3 dogs, 2 kids, and not a single sense of accountability. If a faucet broke, I fixed it. If the trash overflowed, I took it out. If the mortgage was due, I double-checked that it was paid, because I knew what would happen if it wasn't tea. And sure enough, one day, it wasn't tea. I got the letter in the mail, notice of delinquency. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I'd set up automatic payments years ago. But when I called the bank, the voice on the other end said something that made my chest tighten. "Ma, your last 3 payments were missed. We've been in contact with the listed payer." The listed payer wasn't me anymore. It was Mark, when they'd taken over the monthly payments to help out. I thought it was a sign of responsibility. In reality, it was a rope around my neck, because every time he missed a payment, the credit hit my name, not his, not Amy's, mine. I remember sitting there, listening to the hold music, staring at the ceiling. My own daughter's family lived upstairs laughing, while my credit score dropped lower than my basement floor. I didn't tell them that day. Instead, I went upstairs and asked casually, "Hey, did you pay the mortgage?" Mark looked irritated. We refiguring things out, Brenda. You don't need to nag. That word stung. It was the same word he used when I reminded him to mow the lawn. The same one when I mentioned the kids' mess in the hallway. The same one he used when he said, "You really should be grateful, Brenda. You've got family around you. Most old ladies die alone." He thought that was kindness. I went back downstairs, closed the door, and cried quietly into my hands. Not because of the money, but because that was the moment I realized they didn't see me as a mother anymore, just as a resource. I kept a notebook after that. Every payment I made, every bill they ignored, $142.1 Thyron Electric, $312.8 Thyre groceries, $590 Thyre partial mortgage payment, $1,027.6 ID. Total that month. By the time I hit the last page, the number was $11,000. $11,000 of silence, resentment, and misplaced love. Sometimes, at night, I'd flip through those pages, not as a record, but as proof that I hadn't imagined it. Because when you constantly gaslit by the people you love, you start to wonder if you the crazy one. Amy would come downstairs once a week, mostly to use my laundry machine or ask for something. "Mom, could you pick up milk?" "Mom, Ethan's daycare bill is due." "Mom, you don't mind watching the kids again, right?" There was never a question mark in her voice, just expectation. When I hinted about the bills, she'd sigh and say, "You always so dramatic. It's just money. Just money." I wanted to scream. That just money was my retirement, my peace, my sense of control over the only thing I had left, but I didn't. Because every time I tried to stand up for myself, she'd twisted into guilt. "Wow, Mom. After everything I've done for you, you can help us out a little." Everything she'd done for me, that was rich. I gave her life. I gave her shelter, and she gave me debt. The breaking point came on a humid July afternoon. I was doing laundry, my old washing machine rattling like it might fall apart. From upstairs I heard laughter, Mark's booming laugh, Amy's giggle, and then the sound of ice clinking in glasses. They were hosting a barbecue. Dozens of people in my backyard, eating food bought with my money, sitting in chairs I once picked out for family dinners that actually meant something. No one had invited me. I stood by the window, watching through the glass. Mark had his arm around Amy, showing off the house. "Our place," he said proudly. "Our place." Something inside me went completely still. That was it. The moment the last thread snapped, I realized, ID. Let them rewrite the story of who owned what, who gave, who sacrificed. And if I didn't, to reclaim it now, I'd die invisible in that basement, while they lived upstairs pretending they built it all themselves. That night, after everyone left, I sat at my little basement desk and pulled out the folder. Bank statements, mortgage records, utility bills, 13 years of proof. Every dollar, every late payment, every lie. I lined them up like soldiers in a silent army. Then I took a deep breath and whispered, "This ends now." But even then, even in that moment of quiet rebellion, I felt the ache of love in my chest, because I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. I wanted my daughter to look at me and say, "Mom, you were right." But she never would, so I had to be the one to say it to myself. The next morning, I told them we needed to talk. Amy rolled her eyes. Mark said he was busy, but I insisted. We sat at that same kitchen table where, 13 years earlier, we made our ground rules. Except now, the rules were nothing but ghosts. "I can't do this anymore," I said. Amy frowned. "Do what?" "This, the bills. The mortgage. The pretending I am selling the house." Mark laughed. Actually laughed. "You're not serious. We've been living here over a decade. You can't just sell it." "I can," I said quietly, "and I will." Amy's voice rose. Mom, we re-family. You can just kick your grandchildren out. My hands trembled. I am not kicking anyone out. I am taking back my life. Mark stood up, red-faced. You're not even thinking straight. We should be on the deed anyway. We've paid into this place for years. Then show me the receipts, I said. For once, silence. That silence was my freedom's first breath. They thought it was a bluff. For weeks, they ignored the for sale sign I planted on the lawn. Amy tried guilt. Mark tried manipulation. Even the kids cried, because their parents told them Grandma was abandoning them. But I didn't waver. When the realtor called to confirm an offer, I said yes before I could overthink it. Not to them. Not for them. For me. That night, I packed my things again, but this time I wasn't moving downstairs. I was moving out. I sat in the dark, the ticking clock on the wall pounding like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. For the first time in months, I didn't reach for the phone to call Michael. I didn't check my bank balance. I didn't cry. I just breathed. That night, I opened an old folder my husband had left behind. A letter written years ago. He wrote, "If love ever starts to feel like debt, Brenda, it's not love anymore." That line split me open. It wasn't just Michael who had used me. It was my own fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, that had chained me to him. I had confused control for care, guilt for gratitude. The next morning, I went to the bank. I froze my accounts. I filed a report for elder financial abuse. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. When Michael found out, he showed up at my door, his face twisted in disbelief. "You're reporting your own son," he shouted. I looked him straight in the eyes. "No, I'm reporting the man who stole from me." For a moment, he didn't speak, and in that silence, for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I wasn't his bank anymore. I wasn't his backup plan. I was his mother, yes, but I was also Brenda. And Brenda had finally woken up. After that day, the air in my house felt different, lighter, quieter. For years, every corner had echoed with Michael's demands. "Mom, I need this. Mom, it's just temporary. Mom, you don't understand." Now, the only sound left was the hum of my freedom. I met with a financial advisor from my church, a kind woman named Carol. She helped me untangle the mess Michael had left behind. Together, we closed joint accounts, rerouted my pension, and changed every password. For the first time in decades, the numbers on the screen belonged only to me. But money wasn't the hardest part to reclaim. It was my dignity. When word got around town, people whispered, "She's suing her own son. She must be bitter." But I didn't let shame win this time, because for once I knew the difference between love and loyalty born from fear. Michael tried to call, then text. Then he sent flowers, as if petals could erase years of manipulation. I returned the bouquet, untouched, with a single note: "Love doesn't demand receipts." He stopped contacting me after that. And you know what? Silence can be the sweetest apology you'll never hear. I started small, volunteering at the senior center, sharing my story with other women who'd been tricked, drained, or silenced by their own children. Some cried. Some nodded in quiet understanding. All of us carried the same invisible bruise, the bruise of being too kind for too long. Now, when I sit on my porch, I no longer wait for a phone call that never comes. I sip my coffee. I read the paper, and I whisper to the morning air, "I am not a victim of love. I am the survivor of misplaced devotion." Because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like a door closing softly. Finally, for good. It's been 2 years since I left that house. Sometimes when I wake up in my little cottage down south, sunlight spilling across the floor, I still have to remind myself. I don't owe anyone a thing anymore. There are no slammed doors. No unpaid bills slipped under my coffee cup. No footsteps upstairs that aren't mine. Just quiet. Sweet, Golden quiet. People still ask if I ever talked to Michael. The answer is no. And I've made peace with that. Because forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting yourself walk away, without guilt, without apology. I used to think love meant sacrifice, that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left. But now, I've learned something no one ever taught me. Love has boundaries, and kindness without boundaries is just a slow form of self-destruction. To anyone listening who's still holding on, to the hope that your child, your sibling, your partner will suddenly change. Hear this from me, you can save people by ruining yourself. I lost 13 years, $11,000, and nearly my peace of mind. But I gained something more valuable than all of that. My freedom, my laughter, my mornings. So if you ever find yourself staring at the mess love left behind, remember this. It's never too late to reclaim your story. Even after decades of silence, even after the world calls you heartless. Because choosing yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. And for the first time in over 40 years, I am free.